Pressure groups. Listen. In pressure groups, you should know what do you mean by pressure groups. What is the difference between interest group and pressure group? What is the difference between pressure group and political party? What are the techniques employed by the pressure groups? And what are the types of pressure groups? Examples of pressure groups and challenges faced by the pressure groups. This is the structure of pressure groups. Pressure groups are the groups which influence or exert pressure on the government in order to achieve common interest of the group. They exert some influence or pressure on policy makers or decision makers so that they will get some outcome for the benefit of the common interest of the group. Pressure groups form a vital link between the governors and the governed, the people and the government. Pressure groups form a vital link between the people and the government. The word pressure group is coined in America. It was originated in America. In Western societies, pressure groups have a very positive role to play. In fact, in Great Britain, pressure groups have emerged in a largest and highest way with the highest platitude, and the outcomes from pressure groups are really good. And we have large number of pressure groups than political parties in various countries like USA, Britain, France, etc. In fact, pressure groups represents the advancement of society. Pressure groups represent how people will come forward to form a group for protecting their common interest. This is called a pressure group. There is a difference between a pressure group and a political party. Political party contests in elections. Pressure group do not contest in elections. Political party contest in elections. Pressure groups do not contest in elections. Though pressure groups do not contest in elections, they will influence the elections. They will influence elections. In fact, they try to play a political game sometimes by contributing to a political party indirectly. Pressure groups and political parties help mutually each other. Pressure groups sometimes support political parties. In fact, some pressure groups follow a particular political ideology and support a political party and gives a very good vote base to a political party. Political parties are heterogeneous groups. That means environmental activists, lawyers, doctors, women, or even peasants. There will be heterogeneous membership in a political party. Means from various groups and various sections we have a membership in a political party. Whereas pressure group is a homogeneous group where people with common interest come and flock together. People with common interest come and flock together. Political party works in a formal and organized structure. It is more formal in nature. It has a proper command, proper structure. Pressure groups need not have proper command and proper structure always. They need not have proper command, proper structure always. Political parties work for power. Pressure groups work for common interest. Political parties work for power. Pressure groups work for common interest. These are the basic differences between political parties and pressure groups. And you should also understand difference between pressure groups and interest groups. The word pressure group and the word interest group. The word pressure group and the word interest group generally is used interchangeably. Generally is used interchangeably, but they are not one and the same. They are not one and the same. Pressure groups apply sometimes coercion. Coercion means force. Whereas interest groups apply persuasive tactics. Interest groups apply persuasive tactics. Pressure groups and interest groups are almost same. They work for common interest. Interest groups are comparatively more organized than pressure groups. Interest groups have a formal organization structure for communication and command and monetary issues than pressure groups. And interest groups very rarely exert political influence. They are not political in nature. Pressure groups indirectly supports politics, to an extent exert certain influence on politics, and sometimes pressure groups after reaching a point might turn into a political party also. Pressure groups after reaching certain point sometimes might emerge into a political party also. This is the difference between interest group and pressure group. Interest group persuasion, pressure group coercion. Interest group is completely non-political. Pressure group indirectly exerts pressure on politics, indirectly influence politics. Interest group have proper formal setup, organization setup compared to pressure group. For communication, monetary issues, command, interest group is far better structured than pressure group. And pressure groups are of foreign origin. And coming to techniques, there are various techniques of pressure groups. One of the most important technique which you should write in the exam is pressure groups employ a technique called lobbying. Pressure groups employ a technique called lobbying. They will lobby. Lobbying is a negative word in India. If somebody lobbies, we will consider it as a negative thing. Whereas in foreign countries, lobbying is a positive word. Lobbying is one of the important technique. Second is electioneering, supporting elections indirectly. Third is pressure groups also sometimes employ techniques like protests, demonstrations, garrows, etc. Garrows, protests, demonstrations. Sometimes pressure groups end up in violent activities also. So there are various techniques of pressure groups. The basic technique is lobbying. Next technique is electioneering. Next technique is protest, demonstrations, strikes, etc. These are the techniques of pressure groups. Types of pressure groups. See, there are various kinds and types of pressure groups. One type of pressure group is anonymous pressure group. Generally, one type of pressure group is anomic pressure group. Anomic. Anomic means spontaneously it will emerge. Spontaneously it will emerge. ANOMIC. For example, after Nirbhaya incident, spontaneously people have come out and started agitations and demonstrations, and they have exerted a lot of pressure on government, and government have immediately constituted a committee, Justice Verma committee, and government have immediately made Nirbhaya Act and also made fast track trial of culprits in Nirbhaya incident. Anomic pressure group. There are different types like association pressure groups, non-association pressure group, religious groups and association pressure groups, they are very strong. Non-association pressure groups also exist sometimes like environmental groups, all these groups. And pressure groups is considered as a legislation behind the legislature. They are like legislation behind the legislature, and they are considered as a vacuum fillers because government cannot penetrate and government cannot do all the work. Government cannot penetrate, government cannot do all the work. So sometimes pressure groups are also called as anonymous empire. Sometimes pressure group is also called as anonymous empire. Now you will get a doubt. What are the types of pressure groups in India? What are the examples of pressure groups? Pressure groups are of many kinds. Indian National Congress is also a pressure group in the beginning. It exerted pressure on British government to give independence to India. One of the best example of a traditional pressure group is Indian National Congress. And TRS, Telangana Rashtra Samiti, is basically a pressure group to exert pressure on the government for Telangana state. And coming to examples, there are students pressure groups, there are peasants pressure groups, there are business pressure groups, there are religious pressure groups, there are tribal pressure groups. For example, Jharkhand Mukti Morcha is a pressure group, tribal pressure group, later on become a political party. For example, ABVP is a pressure group, SFI is a pressure group, students pressure groups. For example, in the pressure groups, you have business groups, FICCI, ASSOCHAM, etc. For example, in the pressure groups, you have Kisan groups, Bharatiya Kisan Sabha, Kisan Mazdoor Shakti Sangathan. Some NGOs sometimes act like a pressure group also. For example, you have religious groups like Hindu Mahasabha, now RSS might be a pressure group. So these are the examples of pressure groups. Now the present trend is pressure groups are emerging for women. Okay, even the present Me Too movement, if it becomes enlarged, because the new technique of the modern pressure group is using social media. Earlier, pressure groups has to come to a platform and fight. Now, social media have become a great platform for a pressure group. Now, Me Too movement can be considered as a social movement and also a pressure group. Now, if it becomes more formal, and environmental groups, sometimes Beach Bachao Andolan, Narmada Bachao Andolan might exert some pressure on the government. Or sometimes pressure groups might erupt spontaneously. As I told you, anti-Nirbhaya, anti-rape movements or anti-corruption movement. Anna Hazare's Jan Lokpal movement exerted strong pressure on the government to expedite the Lokpal bill passing. To expedite the passing of Lokpal bill, to speed up the passing of Lokpal bill. So pressure groups are of various kinds. Some are like traditional, like religious groups, tribal groups, students groups, business groups. Some are like very modern. LGBT movements, LGBT groups. For example, NAM Foundation is an NGO, but it actually works for this. For example, women groups, they all exert pressure on the government. These are called pressure groups. Pressure groups try to influence the policy, but they won't contest in elections. Remember, pressure groups try to influence the policy. They don't contest in the elections. They try to exert some pressure by employing various techniques. The major technique is lobbying. They employ various techniques. The major technique is lobbying. Pressure groups work in tandem, work together. The members in the pressure group work, their goal is same, their target is same. Okay, they are mostly organized, not completely formal like political parties. They are mostly organized, not completely formal like political parties. They work for the common interest. They fill the gap between the governors and the governed. Okay, this is a basic pressure group. And the modern trend In India, pressure groups are still nascent. They are making still baby steps. Whereas in France, in Britain, in various Ireland, in various Western countries, pressure groups have a strong hold. In fact, more number of pressure groups in the country signifies more civic awareness, more civil society, enlightened civil society, and more interest in the society will be survived. In fact, pressure groups represent the progress of the society. Pressure groups actually work for the progression of the society, and with more and more pressure groups, there will be more betterment in various sections. For example, environmental protection. For example, say there is a pressure group and also a movement in Kudankulam, People's Action Against Nuclear Energy. People's Action Against Nuclear Energy. They have exerted strong pressure on the government against nuclear energy, and pressure groups sometimes might be sentimental and emotional also. They need not be always rational sometimes, some of the pressure groups. So, pressure groups, something religious groups, conservative groups need not always be rational also. So, the topic pressure groups is very important for GS and optional. First I will give notes pressure groups in India, then we will go for the notes of pressure groups in the world. Take down the notes. First heading, difference between, already I have discussed basic structure. Now we will have a small recap on basic structure theory. Basic structure means fundamental principles or core values of the constitution on which our constitution is built. Basic structure means fundamental principles or core values of the constitution on which our constitution is built. The word basic structure we don't find in the Indian constitution. It was not originated from the constitution. The word basic structure we don't find in the Indian constitution, and the word is not originated from the constitution. Basic structure doctrine is a judicially evolved doctrine. Basic structure doctrine is a judicially evolved doctrine. Similar basic structure theory we also find in other countries. For example, Canada. In Canada also we have basic structure theory, which is a judicially evolved doctrine. The famous case for basic structure theory is Keshavananda Bharati versus State of Kerala, 1973. The famous case for basic structure is Keshavananda Bharati versus State of Kerala, 1973. Also called as basic structure case, also called as fundamental rights case. Keshavananda Bharati case, also called as basic structure case, also called as fundamental rights case. In prelims, if they give a question, what is fundamental rights case? It is Keshavananda Bharati case. What is basic structure theory case? It is Keshavananda Bharati case. Keshavananda Bharati versus State of Kerala. In basic structure theory, you should start your answer from Shankari Prasad case. Shankari Prasad case. There are 7 fundamental rights when the constitution was framed. Right to property is a fundamental right till 44th Amendment 1978. Till 44th Amendment 1978, right to property is a fundamental right. Shankari Prasad case deals with, can the parliament by constitutional amendment take away fundamental right? Can the parliament by constitutional amendment take away fundamental right? The Supreme Court said, fundamental rights cannot be taken away by law, but they can be taken away by constitutional amendment. In Shankari Prasad case, the Supreme Court said, law making power is different from constitutional amendment power. Law making power is a legislative power. Constitutional amendment power is a constituent power. Law making power is a legislative power. Constitutional amendment power is a constituent power. By ordinary law, the parliament cannot take away fundamental right. By ordinary law, the parliament cannot take away fundamental right. But by constitutional amendment, the parliament can take away fundamental right. The same judgment is followed in Sajjan Singh versus State of Rajasthan. The same judgment is followed in Sajjan Singh versus State of Rajasthan. That means by amending the constitution, fundamental rights can be taken away, not by making a law. Parliament have power to amend the constitution, power to make a law. Power to make a law is called a legislative power. Power to amend the constitution is called constituent power. Parliament by using its legislative power cannot take away fundamental right. But Parliament by using its constituent power can take away fundamental rights. But the judgments in Shankari Prasad, Sajjan Singh and other cases have said Parliament by constitutional amendment can take away fundamental rights. Whereas in Golaknath versus State of Punjab, Golaknath versus State of Punjab 1967, the Supreme Court said, Justice particularly Subbarao, even by constitutional amendment, the Parliament should not touch fundamental rights chapter. Even by constitutional amendment, the Parliament should not touch fundamental rights. And then Golaknath case is very important because in this case there is a doctrine called doctrine of prospective overruling was enunciated. In this case there is a doctrine called doctrine of prospective overruling. What is prospective overruling? The judgment in Golaknath case is applicable in future cases, not in the past cases. Shankari Prasad, Sajjan Singh, all these previous cases will hold good. From Golaknath judgment onwards, Golaknath judgment will hold good. From Golaknath judgment onwards, Golaknath judgment will hold good. So in Golaknath versus State of Punjab, the Supreme Court said, there was a judge also called, he is a judge, his name is Justice Subbarao. The Supreme Court said, even by constitutional amendment, the Parliament should not take away fundamental rights. And then what happened? The Indira Gandhi government in 1971 made 24th amendment. Through this amendment, she said, the Parliament said, through this amendment, to 24th amendment, the Parliament said, law does not mean constitutional amendment. Law does not mean constitutional amendment. They have added clause 4 to article 13 by 24th amendment. Clause 4 to article 13 by 24th amendment and said, law does not mean constitutional amendment. Okay, that means by constitutional amendment I can do anything. Parliament said, by constitutional amendment I can take away fundamental rights. And this 24th amendment was questioned in Keshavananda Bharati versus State of Kerala 1973. This 24th amendment is questioned in Keshavananda Bharati versus State of Kerala 1973. 13 judges discussed the case. The bench constitutes of 13 judges and the judgment came out of 7:6. 7 judges said, 7 judges supported basic structure theory. What do you mean by this basic structure theory? The court said in Keshavananda Bharati case, Parliament can amend any part of the constitution, including the fundamental rights. Parliament can amend any part of the constitution, including the fundamental rights. But Parliament should not touch the basic structure of the constitution. Parliament should not touch the basic structure of the constitution. And the court also said in Keshavananda Bharati case, the power to amend the constitution does not mean the power to abrogate the constitution. Court also said the power to amend the constitution does not mean the power to abrogate the constitution. The power to protect the constitution, the power to make it dynamic does not mean the power to ransack the constitution, the power to dismantle the basic core principles of the constitution. And then the court again said, basic structure doctrine is not exhaustive but illustrative. I cannot make basic structure doctrine as a watertight compartment. Basic structure doctrine is an evolving doctrine. It's an evolving doctrine. From case by case, situation to situation, we will define the basic structure. Not by a single judgment, not by a watertight compartment, but we are trying to define that basic structure theory by case. For example, in Indira Gandhi versus Raj Narayan 1975, Indira Gandhi versus Raj Narayan 1975, rule of law, free and fair elections are considered as basic structure. Rule of law, democratic process, free and fair elections, it is considered as basic structure. The very famous case Indira Gandhi versus Raj Narayan. What is this case all about? Indira Gandhi's election was questioned in Allahabad High Court. Indira Gandhi's election was questioned in Allahabad High Court. Her opponent Raj Narayan said that she used all her official machinery, office staff to win over the elections. And after verifying all the facts, Allahabad High Court gave a judgment. This is the famous Indira Gandhi versus Raj Narayan. The court said, rule of law. You might be the Prime Minister, the other person might be the common man. Law is applicable to both of you equally, and election should be free and fair. You should not use your office for elections. Election should be free and fair. Rule of law, democratic process, free and fair elections, it is a basic structure of Indian Constitution set by the Allahabad High Court in Indira Gandhi versus Raj Narayan. In the same way, in Minerva Mills versus Union of India 1980,